Tom, floor is yours. I think everybody knows Tom. Tom's been part of Altronic for many, many years here and is obviously well-versed on the service support subjects. So Tom's going to give us a good rundown here on where things stand on the 3 and the 5 NG subjects here and some of the service-related issues and so on as we continue to roll this product out. So Dana has already started recording, and Tom, please feel free to start when you're ready, sir.
Okay, thanks, Dave. We're going to start out with the Altronic 3 and 3NG and then move into the 5 and 5NG. And with that, first of all, wanted to make sure everybody realizes that almost everything we're going to talk about today has literature on the web that can be accessed that's going to give you everything that we're showing you today in a little more detail. So just make sure you know where to access it. From our homepage, altronic-llc.com. For the 3s, you would go to the Altronic 3 section in the ignition systems, and there's going to be, just like the layout of all of our literature, you've got a brochure, application, installation, and service. And those are all Altronic 3s. Then you move into the same layout with the NGs. So with that, the Altronic 3, unless you're new to Altronic, Altronic 3s have been out since the 60s, and they've been revised a number of times to give improvements, incorporate new manufacturing components and methods, and that's almost what we're doing today with the NG series, is that, you know, parts aren't made, components are not made forever, so at some point you have to start moving into new designs, and in this case, the simplification and cost reduction is a great improvement. The legacy Altronic 3, just want to point out with the 5s and the 3s, we have all the legacy units before the NGs, and those boards are all still available. So there is a backup plan if something should go south with any of the newer designs. We can still get all the components, parts, pieces to build all the 3s and the 5s. There are some limitations with the new NG, and any replacements needing the T or timing option, which is the timing connector, that extra connector on the back cover, you have to still use the Legacy 3. We have not done any of these boards with the T connector in the NG. So with the evolution of these products, we still have this 381-601 box and the 381-610. Those components, if they are still in use, you still need a timing connector back cover, which means you still have to use the legacy Altronic 3. The 381-610 is no longer available. It's obsolete. You can't buy them, but we still have some of the dual timing boxes available. So the Altronic 3 being a solid state mechanical system, it's all self-powered. The rotation generates the energy. It's stored on the capacitor, eliminates your breaker points. It's a modular back cover design. So if you do have a failure, generally it's in the back cover and you can just replace the back cover. Easily installed in time. The window on the back has the timing indication for clockwise or counterclockwise. And since the 60s, these are used and accepted throughout the world. This shows the modular back cover design, and this we showed because this is one of the early legacies, probably from into the 80s. With this storage capacitor design, the circuit board looks like this. The newer ones had the square capacitors on them. The timer arm and all the pickup coils, these are wound with wire and have some components on them. That's all what's replaced with simpler components in the new NG system. The alternator section still remains the same. All the alternator, the connector, everything is the same from the old style legacy to the NG system. So this is just a view of the input shaft pickup, or the connector flange shaft going in. the gears, the drive gear, the driven gear, pickup coils, circuit board in the back cover, um, just sort of where everything's located from a cutaway type view. So now into the NG or next generation technology. Some of the things that have been improving are the full ignition output energy at reduced starting speed. So that's going to improve startability of the engines when they're cranking slow. It's also giving you increased spark duration for combustion stability, gives you better spark plug life, and the timing accuracy is also improved. The nice thing when you look at this design over here on the bottom right, when you see this cup, there's no more arm on it. This cup is aluminum with a magnet in there, and it goes by all the Hall effects, which replace the trigger coils. And the circuit board is all one piece mounted below that, 2 storage capacitors on this one. And you can see it's quite a bit simpler than the old design. So this gives you long-term parts and service access, cost control, which is important, and fewer moving parts, which gives you better reliability. And you still have all these standard legacy Altronic 3 units and parts in production. So if you need to have a T-back cover or a unit that has not been moved into the 3NG, you still have options. So we've released these and over a certain amount of time. So the first ones we did were the 12 and 6 cylinder units. Those were in 2020, fourth quarter. So we're about 2 years into this right now. In 2021, we did the 8 and 16 cylinder units. And then the 2, 3, 4 cylinders are in step 3, and they have not yet been released. So all the NG literature, application, service, all posted to the web. It's all available. We've adjusted some of the pricing just because of the increasing manufacturing costs, especially for the component parts. And with that makes us need to migrate users into the newer, more capable designs. And not all the 3 legacy models will be transitioned into the 3NG. So we'll be making the legacy units for many, many years. We've also discontinued the R board program, and that's where the circuit boards were returned to Altronic, and you would order an R board, with a R suffix, and that was an exchange board, and it was a brand new board, but it was highly discounted. And with all these changes, we've discontinued that. So there's no longer any need to return any boards. There's no R boards. They're just the normal part number of the circuit board. So there are no more exchange circuit boards. And circuit boards, the standard circuit boards have not been changed significantly. So there are not many changes there. The major failures in an Altronic 3 would be a circuit board failure over many years. And many of them last 5, 10, 15 years. And when it's time to replace that board, when you go into an NG, there's very little cost increase in comparison to the 3 PCB. It's about a 21% increase to go into a complete back cover, which gives you the gears, the cup, which is the timer arm with a magnet, the entire circuit board, the back cover. It's ready to bolt right in. So it's a very cost-effective upgrade. That also gives you the new 2-year warranty and the expanded reliability. Legacy 3 versus the 3NG complete unit part numbers. If you had an 8829 HT, H was high output, T was the timing back cover, described right here. BEL is the mount adjustable base. To go into the NG, you drop the H and the T because there's no T's in the NG variation. Everything is a high output nowadays. It's the same stator. So now you just drop the HT or the H, and it's still the same flange or base mount, and then just an NG added after that. And that's all documented in the application list. All the rest of the part numbers, the firing pattern, the gear ratio, the stator winding, all of those have all remained the same. So you're really just taking the original part number and then adding an NG after it. 3NG back covers are only sold complete right now. There's no service parts yet. All of them are still under warranty. The very first ones went out about 2 years ago. So we're still working through items that are still within warranty, all being less than 2 years old at this point. Front housing, rotor stators are all the same. Nothing's changed there. Back cover part numbers. If you know the Altronic 3 part number, like a 2A19, it says 381-815-01, then an 02 for the different models, and going all the way up through this -84 for a 16T. The engine models not served with the 3 NG variants, which are the low volume, odd firing angle product, are the ones listed here. The Ariels, some Ajaxes, these are yet to be released. You know, the 3, we haven't released the 2, 3, or 4 cylinder units yet. Some of the Clarks, the Ingersoll Rands, some of the Coopers, and again, these some of these, like a 1710, where there's dual units, and you can have a single unit instead of 2 6s. So a lot of these are like that. The 399 is also the same. People have been putting 16-cylinder units on there forever instead of having dual units, 2 6s or 2 8s. So again, these are some of the oddball engines for the Altronic 3. A lot of these engines will get CPU 95s, NGI 1000s, whatever. There's other options. So that brings us into the 5 and 5NG system overview. And the 5 and 5NG have literature on our web, and we can see our new logo. Again, the downloads right here, this gives you all the terminal programs, literature, bulletins, the entire list of everything that's there. And the thing that we have done under the 5 and 5NG is that we've put we've got the brochure, application, installation, service. Then we have 2 other publications, the upgrade instructions, that shows you how to do the upgrade from a conventional 3, legacy 3, to the NG variation, and then service bulletin 527A. It was originally released as 527, and A has some further upgrades or added improvement ideas there. So we're going to go through all these. First, the brochure, Legacy 5. Probably all seen these all the way up through 6-cylinder engines, up to 6 outputs on the unit. CD ignition, alternator like the Altronic 3, generates its own electricity. Pretty much a standard out there on the smaller engines. These Legacy 5s, again, all the Legacy 5 units and boards are still available. So if we have to back up to that, we have that option. Any of the units needing the T timing option must use the Legacy 5. And the dual electronic timing is still available. That's the little box right here that goes to the T connector. And this gives you the ability to select dual timing by an interface switch or set of contacts, like if you had propane as a backup and use some kind of biofuel or something else as a fuel. So it gives you 2 different timing settings. This shows the back cover of the Legacy 5, and this is the back cover of the NG 5. You can see that the timing window is a little bit different because the pickup coil had, it turned on in one direction, turned off after the arm went past it. So if you rotated it backwards, there were 2 different timing marks. for the initial setup. When we go into the NG, because it's a Hall effect switch, we only have one single mark on there. When you look at the back cover, this was the Zener diode stud that stuck through, and we had this nut on there, the specialized nut. Now we just have a cap that goes through here, a screw that seals that shut. So very similar looking. You can order a back cover, you can order a complete unit, or you can just order the upgrade kit and put it all together, you know, in a shop. So the 5NG, pretty much the same as the 5, but it's going to give you some better startability, a lower coming in speed, um, some different improvements. This is the other side of the brochure. It looks very similar to the Legacy, but shows the new parts. So these, the Altronic 5, the Legacy units were first introduced in the early 80s, and the NG, the next generation, gives you full energy, full ignition output energy at reduced starting speeds. So that's an improvement. Better spark duration for improved combustion stability and expanded spark plug life. 25 kV, 300 microseconds versus 80 microseconds. So that's a much longer spark duration, better timing accuracy. And the new design is going to give us long-term parts and service access and cost control. How is it different? When you looked at the pickup assembly, that were wire wound coils and a timer arm and a magnet that energized that. This is a little bit different. We have a trigger magnet, which is very small, on this cup that's mounted underneath this gear. And as that's mounted over top of the circuit board, we have Hall effects, which are surface mount components, which are precisely placed on the circuit board. And by doing so, we have a very accurate timing system, and much simpler if you compare the two. And you will see that when we go into the upgrade instructions. So that's how we do it with a single circuit board, Hall effects on that circuit board. The single magnet goes by and triggers all that. The new rotor magnet installed in the alternator section still uses the original stator windings and stator part numbers. And this is the standard rotor with the individual pole pieces. And this is the new neos for neodymium boron rotor magnet, which replaces the existing 5 rotor. So that's, you press the old one off, press the new one on. And these are upgraded by ordering the update kit from Altronic, and it's going to give you the circuit board, all the hardware, the new magnet rotor, and that kit part number is the existing unit part number with the characters -NG-KT. The KT is kit, which gives you all the hardware, added as a suffix to the end of the old part number. So a 6834A unit would be the kit for the upgrade with us would be a 6834A NG-KT. Or for a 4A24AW, it would be the AW just -NG-KT, and that gives you the entire kit. That gives you the PCB assembly, magnet rotor, gear trigger assembly, and hardware to complete the upgrade process. Same tools that you needed to press the system together prior with a Legacy 5, same tools that you would use for this product. So we'll take a look at the upgrade procedure. This is the original rotor, and this would be removed and no longer used. You're going to get a new one. Then you remove the circuit board assembly, and Then you're going to remove the screws that hold down the plate with all the trigger coils. And you can see, if you just can imagine this assembly plugged into the circuit board versus a single Hall effect component placed on the circuit board, this, you can see how that is greatly simplified over these pickup coil assemblies. And after everything's stripped out, you can see on the right side the entire assembly ready for the new assembly to be put in. This is where the old Zener was mounted. So there's a hole plug that's part of the hardware kit. Then the circuit board goes in, and then these 3 screws mount that board to that. Each one of these screws create a ground to the back cover itself. So we're going to show you in the following slides how important this is and what you need to do to properly attach that. This is the ground and heat sink that is mounted to this screw right here. This is the entire assembly, and we sell this gear with the cup mounted to that. We do that in a fixture at the factory to keep everything centered around the center of the shaft and to make sure that the gear is not off center. And you can see that there's a blue material on these right now, and that is a thread locking compound. And you know, on nylon gears like this, you cannot use traditional Loctite, you know, the red or blue or the purple Loctite. It does not work on a nylon material. This is specific locking, a Loctite material for use on plastics like that, like this nylon. So these are all put together at the factory. And if you have any of the older ones without this locking material, we did have a few of these on high vibration applications, and some of them would vibrate these screws loose within an hour, a day, or 5 days. And we learned what was happening. So we've improved the hardware on here, larger washers, the thread locking material, longer screws. So if any of those fail for that reason, we'll talk about it in later slides, but we're offering an extended warranty on any of these known failure modes. And then this is the magnet installed in the alternator section and your connector. So this is ready to be put together. Again, PCB replacement versus the NG upgrade kit. And the upgrade kit price cost competitively with traditional PCB only replacements. And if you compare the price of just replacing the PCB to the cost of a complete upgrade kit, which is the magnet rotor, all the hardware, gears, everything else, it's only about 10% more. So it's a very cost-effective way to get into the NG and make that improvement to the new system. So the upgrade instructions, and this is the original website where we had under the 5, we had the, you know, all the NGs, the brochure, application installation service, then the upgrade instructions. But if you needed this bulletin 527A, it was in the bulletins, but it was somewhat obscure and you had to know to look for it. So on the right side, we just did this about a week ago. We've put that service bulletin right in with the 5 and 5NG. So it's obvious that there are 3 different items that you're going to need to look at when upgrading a 5 and 5NG. And that bulletin is listed in both places now. So if you used to go in here to get it, you can still find it there, but it's also listed in the 5NG section. So we're going to talk a little bit about the bulletin 527, 527A. And 527A brings about all the latest improvements. And this was 610. So it's only 3 months ago that this was released. And over the month or 2 prior to this, we had made some of the improvements. We'd seen the warranty failures come in, and we had to do various things to fix those. So this bulletin is going to talk a little bit about them, and we'll go over those right now. So the improved hardware on the 57410-X, that's just the gear ratio, magnet holder gear assembly. So you can see the little magnet right there. And this is the bottom side. And these are the improved washers. They just used to have a split lock washer underneath them. Now they have the locking material, the bigger washers. You can see some of that blue material on the bottom side here. And the improved adhesive on the main storage capacitor. When we originally built these, we used silicone, white silicone. And if you look up here to the picture in the top center, you can see some of that white silicone. And we've used white silicone to secure capacitors in many products over the years. But for some reason, the vibration levels on the worst case, a lot of the Cummins and some of the other engines on irrigation engines where they're running a different RPM, different application. And most of these failures have been in irrigation. We've seen that the capacitor will actually fracture on the leads underneath it, and then the product quits firing the engine. So after you remove the capacitor, you can see that the silicone's still there, but it allowed it to wobble enough to allow the leads to fracture below that. So our solution, and this is what has fixed it in the Altronic 3s. And we did fail to mention that the first 50 or so Altronic 3 NGs use silicone on the capacitor. And we saw a couple of them fail. So in the 3 NGs, we also went to the epoxy. And the epoxy on the 3 NGs, there's 2 holes underneath the capacitor. So you can fill the bottom side of it from the other side of the circuit board. And on this product, because there's no holes below it, this is one that the early application of the epoxy, this one doesn't look as pretty as this one right here. This one's been smoothed, but you may see either variation, and functionally they're the same. They're very effective in gluing this capacitor down. And once it doesn't move anymore, those leads don't fracture, and we've had no failures once we started gluing them down in this fashion. And we started doing that a month or two before this bulletin. So the majority of them out there have this silicone. And again, this is one of those forever warranties where if it fails because of that reason, we're going to give you a whole new board with a new epoxy. We're going to stand behind all these products. And again, it's not everyone that fails. We don't know how many of them will fail over time, but as long as you know that they're warranted, we can get them all fixed and corrected. This bulletin also, we'll take a look at a little closer. But that bulletin, the next page talks about the location of the Hall effects, the go, no-go gauges shown in yellow and orange here, and that's to set the gap. And then we have a picture here of the mounting location of the ground on the circuit board and how this needs cleaned, and then the grounding. So we'll go to the next page. These are the locations of the Hall effect switches. And when we originally built these, the first ones that we built in the factory, new housings, all the hardware was correct, all of them were attached properly, and we had virtually zero failures from this grounding issue out in the field. But what we found is people were upgrading older back covers is that the holes that these attach to, these screws in the housing, I think we have a better, it's these holes right below these screws right here, that they may not have been tapped as deep. And this circuit board is about 20 thousandths thinner than the old aluminum disc that held the pickup coils. So being thinner, we're afraid that some of these screws had bottomed out and never properly attached the circuit board and grounded it. And we had gotten some of them back with this kind of arcing obvious on the 3 screws. And you know, if you ground one of these screws, the other two will not arc. It only takes one good attachment to give you a good ground of the circuit board. But in a case like this, all three of these had arced. So we have a solution, and that solution is to use a new screw and a new type locking washer. And this is hardware included in the Dash KT on all the upgrade kits. And that is the part number is listed here, 901090-PK pack, and that's 25 pieces. And that's a nylon patch screw, and you've seen us use those in other products for flanges and various other things. So this is also shorter. We went from a 3/8 to a 5/16 screw, so we're sure that these are not going to bottom out. So make sure you use the new screw when you mount those circuit boards. Use the new conical washer, and as you compress them down and tighten them, these deform. It's a springing type action, so it gives spring pressure against the screw. You also have the nylon patch in there to stop it from loosening. So these conical washers have a cup shape that gives them a spring-like flexibility to grip tighter than split tooth lock washers. Minimize loosening from wear, temperature changes, and vibration. Serrations on the top and bottom give this extra gripping power. So these are those three screws right here. You're going to want to make sure that they use those. And also, the other thing that we did was to go back to adding these shims. These shims are necessary just due to the variations in dimensions over the many years. You may have a 1980s vintage sand cast housing that you're putting these boards into. And over the years, tolerance stack up, what we had seen is when you put this all together, if you didn't check this clearance, some of these cups were actually going down and knocking off the Hall effects right off the board. So we've gone back to adding the requirement to check it with these shims. Go, no-go gauges you're probably familiar with. It sets the gap somewhere between 20 and 30 thousandths, so that you have adequate triggering because to give it, you know, a close enough gap. But this, obviously, if it's closer than 20 thousandths, you have to add a couple of these shims. These are the exact same shim that was used in the Legacy 5, so they're probably in your stock. So all you have to do is add one, check the gap, add a second one if necessary, and put it back together. So that's the solution for the cup being too tight and knocking the components off the board. The other thing that we didn't mention was cleaning this with a wire wheel. Just because this is where the circuit board gets mounted, you want to make sure that this gets wire wheeled and you take all the oxidation off of the aluminum. So that's another improvement we mentioned in the service bulletin. The next thing, there have been some failures of the Hall effect circuits on these, and sometimes they fail fairly quickly. Sometimes it takes a day or two, an hour, 5 days. We're not quite sure. And the only thing that we can duplicate in the factory is by using poor grounding methods. And many of these, depending on the model, for example, the 6-cylinder units, the 4 through 6-cylinder units, does not have a ground in the connector. Some of the other units do, and that ground comes out of the harness and goes up to the minus. But in many of these 4 and 6 cylinders, especially, you have to have this ground from the back cover back to the engine ground, coil ground, and that's engine ground as you see the symbol right there. So that's very important. And the other thing that we've seen is some of the test stands, you know, just because you bolt this unit up and there's a ground through the chassis doesn't mean that there's a good ground all the way back to the coil system and the base of the test stand. And then sometimes the test stand has coil grounding that's not adequate, and you end up with a lot of spikes going back into the circuitry. So we have now included in the kits this ground wire, and when you install this, it's imperative that you do add this ground, and also on the test stands that you use this ground. And going over some of the grounds on the test stands may have alleviated it at our distributors, but we still have some dealers out there that may have some poorly grounded test stands. So we're going to need to look at that to make sure that everything is properly grounded and we're doing the best we can. The other thing that you'll see on the back, especially on units going out, this will already be affixed, and it's a loose tag with an adhesive, and it says to avoid damage, back cover screw must be grounded to the engine and common coil ground. And so this will be supplied loose in that kit for the upgrade. If you get a brand new unit, this is going to be attached right there, and it's also going to be affixed to the back cover. So in summary, the improvements, as we've learned over the last couple years, we've added the epoxy to the capacitor, and that's totally resolved any loose capacitor issues with high vibration and failure of that capacitor. Revised instructions for the magnet gear shims, eliminating the interference and damage of the Hall effect components. Improved hardware for the PC mounting solves the issues with loose PCBs and poor PCB grounding. That's the new screw with the nylon patch and the new conical washers. Grounding on the 4 to 6 cylinder units from the back cover screw to the engine block is emphasized in the instructions. Added ground wire in the kits and on the units is going to help, and it's going to prompt you to attach that ground wire. And that proper grounding is imperative. This includes test stands and on the engine. If we've addressed most of these issues, but we've still got some lingering over the last few months where we've had some of these Hall effect failures from spikes or transients from what we believe is the installation. Those field issues will be investigated by the Altronic support team. We've got Curtis going out on some of them next week. So we're trying to dig in as best we can and get all of those understood and resolved. And just to make sure we're covered, all these 5NG issues that have been corrected with these improvements will be supported with the warranty claim process through our distribution for an indefinite extension period. So, you know, a couple of years down the road, if you have the screws loosen, or if you have the capacitor loosen off the board, or if you have Hall effects that fail from a ground wire that becomes loose or whatever, we're going to take care of that. So don't be concerned that we're going to walk away from this. We're going to take care of this 5NG product and the 3NG product. So that's the conclusion of the presentation. And at this time, you can ask any questions verbally or by texting them on the team website.
Folks, questions for Tom. Tom, well done, and I think very clear overview on this sort of evolving product line. So much appreciated. So questions for Tom.
If there are no questions, be assured that you can always reach me at my email address, thomas.smith@herbiger.com. I think everybody in our distribution on this website and this presentation knows how to get a hold of me. Don't be afraid to raise any questions or concerns, and make sure we address all your requirements as necessary.